All right, let's talk about Wolong. So this game has gotten pretty popular, and then it's kind of gotten much less popular now. And by that I mean, like most new games, it gets talked about a ton, and then it stops being discussed as much. The novelty wore off, basically, and that's not surprising, but hold on, hold on. We're still gonna have something to talk about here. Um, Now, I think this is a good game. I want to get that out of the out of the shop, so to speak, and make sure everyone understands that this is a good game, but it does have some problems, and I think it's a game that's not going to be for everybody, not even for every Souls fan out there. There are a lot of good things going on here, but let's ask some basic questions that I think should go with this sort of series. Should you play this, and why should you play this? Now, I've cleared the game on the main difficulty. You see part 7 right there that I'm scrolling through just to show you that I've cleared this stuff. But I'm on the harder difficulty now. That's why it becomes Rising Dragon on the top. And I find that it's pretty good. The difficulty gets a little harder. Things hit a little harder. You get slightly better gear. But I don't think it's as interesting as Neo was about giving you lots of options. At least I haven't found it. I put a good amount of hours into this, but it just hasn't captured me the same way. But let's talk about why. How good is this game? Who is it for? Why should you spend time on it? And what are you going to get out of it ultimately? I think this is good for players who, surprise, surprise, like action combat with a little bit of a Souls-like flair, which fits the sort of Neo style that we've seen before. I'd say it's Souls adjacent, but not really what I'd say Souls-like. Like, yeah, you have like the campfire basic idea. Yeah, you die and lose your souls, but the combat's very different. It's not methodical. You can't really sit there and come up with a lot of ideas. It's kind of like you have to play a certain way or you're going to start having some problems. If you sit there trying to block the whole time, it's just not that effective. You wait too long, even a basic enemy like this little dude that I'm fighting right here, even they become an issue. So if you're playing poorly, you're going to have a hard time. And this game really wants you to play a specific way. It wants you to be fast-paced, it wants you to abuse certain types of attacks, and it really wants you to, really execute well. Now here I'm just kind of derping around a little bit. I was kind of just remembering how to play because it's been like a week or two, and I've been playing other things, so I was just testing out different weapons. My two main ones. One is really a quick-paced weapon, and the other is a slower pace, but I'll get more into that in a little bit. Now, ultimately, the best way to handle the levels I've found was to just try to take the easy route with a lot of harder enemies, try to get jump attacks, sneak attacks on them, and then make sure you unlock all the flags so that when you fight the bosses, you're not weaker. There's some little tricks I'll share a little bit later, but mostly it's pretty basic. There's not a lot of secrets to find. There's not a lot of like cool things. You're not going to get super rewarded for searching all over the place. You might get some things to increase the amount of healing pots you can use, which are basically like your healing elixirs or Estus, and how strong it is. But ultimately, that's not the most rewarding thing. RNG is pretty much everything. That's going to tell you if you get good weapons or not. Now, let's talk about endgame now really quickly. I think this game is really good for one playthrough. I don't think it's an excellent continued source of enjoyment. I don't think you're going to go back in and spend like 200 hours on this the way you could even in Neo. Now, if you didn't even feel you could do that in Neo, you're definitely not going to feel that here, because there's no real big reward for it. There's not like new armor sets or like in Neo they gave you the divine armor. At least not that I know of. Again, I didn't go through the second playthrough again and go through that, so there might be something else there. But I didn't really feel a push. There wasn't some new like level of gear that was really impressing me, or new set effects that were really, making me want to go back through it. It's possible there could be some there, but it wasn't really well conveyed enough, so I don't know about it. I haven't seen it yet in the few levels I've cleared on the harder difficulty. So, that immediately loses me, because why would I want to keep doing it? Another problem with replaying is, while the flag system is really cool, the first few times you're kind of messing with it, because it basically makes you a little stronger. It makes you have to explore a little bit. It kind of sucks for replay because you just want to burst through and get loot. Your goal isn't really to spend as long as possible in each level, so you're going to just pick the levels that have the shortest routes. It's not a good solution to the problem of people blitzing levels. I think that it's cool to do it one time. I think they should have done something for your second playthrough where it wasn't really a problem. Now for combat, for people who are having trouble with this game, it's really quite simple. Either A, you want to blitz things and be super quick and take advantage of the chi you build up, which is that blue bar at the bottom. You build the chi bar up, and then when you do a special attack with it, whether it's a heavy attack or a weapon skill attack or magic attack, that weapon or attack will do more damage when you have blue chi. When you have red chi, you do less damage with that, and you can also get a broken guard, basically. With lighter, quick weapons, you often have the ability to parry more with minimal consequences. You won't use as much chi failing a parry, whereas like a big heavy weapon like the hammer, you'll use up more chi. It's not so bad later in the game, but it's pretty hard early in the game. So a fast weapon tends to work a little better early on, and then you can switch to what you like. I personally like the hammer. There's some sneakiness you can do with the hammer by doing jump attacks to do really quick hits, which are good for building up chi. It's better than doing the huge wind-up of the basic strikes, which can leave you wide open, especially since you can't parry in the middle of any random attack. So you have to wait for your attack animation to sort of end, and there is a point where you can parry. That point that you can parry is sometimes a little earlier than, you know, right at the end of the animation, so it's not horrible, but there are times where you'll be in the middle of an attack, and you won't be able to cancel it out, because you've, you know, started another huge, long wind-up animation. The fast weapons also have that benefit of you don't get punished as much. But generally, I found that I like the hammer best because you get big, meaty hits. When you hit someone, you do get a lot of chi out of it, as opposed to the little amounts you get for fast weapons. And it's not really too problematic once you have enough, you know, basic energy where you're not going to worry. You have to level up a little bit for that, but, you know, take some time. So yeah, I like that for the heavy weapons. And then you just kind of wait. You parry out things when you know you need to for stronger enemies. And if you just parry and you bait it out, it's a lot better than rushing in and mashing constantly. So you see, like, I kind of wait for that big spear guy there to do his big hit, and then I get enough chi to do something, and it's pretty easy to finish him off without really drawing out the fight. You might notice I'm flying through this level pretty quick. I'm not really wasting a lot of time. Very different from my first playthrough of it, where I was just going nice and slow. I was kind of cautious. I am pretty highly leveled up, so I'm pretty strong. But okay, magic. I think magic kind of sucks in this. I mean, you still need to get into melee. You're not going to be able to sit back and cast a ton of spells. I never really found the need to cast spells, like, as part of my normal attacks. Like, you could build up the energy and do it. I can see how it could feasibly work. I certainly didn't build for it, but I would rather just use weapon attacks and keep it simple. There were some spells I kind of messed around with sometimes, like throwing some poison or throwing like a constant damage effect. Sometimes I would do a healing one because I had a trinket which would do something special whenever I had healing effects go off on me. But building wasn't really that fancy. There wasn't a lot of stuff to do with it. I never found like using spells drastically changed my experience in combat. So that was a little bit of a letdown. Weapon diversity is pretty decent, but I find some weapons are just better than others. If you find a tricky way to play with things, like you'll see this jump attack I'm doing right now, which is definitely a little tricky. I should be using power attacks more, but I'm kind of trying to show that off. You can do some pretty interesting things. It sucks when you miss like I did there. But this does make a slow weapon into a faster weapon. And all that really matters, really, is doing those big, heavy hits. Like, look how much meaty damage I did with that. My basic hits aren't really going to do a lot. So when you're fighting, you don't really want to waste a lot of time with your, you know, basic strikes. They will do some damage, they will build up, but if you can break the enemy, that's way better. And I found with most enemies, that was how I could make the fight easy. Break the enemy, parry them on big hits, do my strong strikes, and then I'm good. Notice how I'm not like running in to do damage right away with a hammer. I wait for the opportunity, I take advantage of it. I do a heavy strike, which gives you some defense, I think, when you go in with that, because you don't take as much damage, even if the enemy hits you while doing that. And it gives you a lot more break damage, so you can kind of build it up. Now, if you start getting hit, especially on the harder difficulties, things can get kind of bad. You can see here I just have to eat my potion. That's normal, don't feel bad about it. You have some special attacks you can do, which do provide some openings. There I got stuck because I was getting greedy, I was trying to attack too much, and it doesn't really pay off. You really should take advantage of when the enemy strikes. trying to get a little too into the combat and trying to strike too much is usually a bad choice. As you can kind of see here. When you break enemies, it just makes it easy. You get big free hits, and it just does so much more damage. Like, look how much this guy's health goes down. It's significant compared to just my normal hits. That doesn't mean normal hits are worthless. It's just focusing on that is much wiser. In general, this first boss I think is pretty hard. When you're brand new to the game, I think they kind of gave you the wrong first fight to do. Now, this is the hard difficulty version of him, but, you know, I've kind of learned the game enough, even though I didn't play it for like a week or two, and this time I still remember how to play. There are some other bosses that get some pretty challenging things that you wouldn't expect, like maybe I'm having to double parry because they do like a slash and it follows up with a flame that you also parry. But it's not really too hard. Once you get the system, it's pretty much locked down for you. You'll understand what to do. Not too bad. So yeah, talking about weapon diversity, like there's a lot of choices. Your build's going to reflect what you want to do. I did a high health, high stamina build so I could have heavy armor because I like heavy armor and I like big weapons when they're not too cumbersome and horrible to use, where like I only feel like I get one hit at a time. And I felt like the hammer was pretty decent for that. There are some varying things, like there's a hammer and then there's like an axe, which are very similar move sets. There are some slight differences, like how much damage you do while you're in a guard or how much spirit damage you do. But I never found like playing around with those was like really enough of a boon. It was just kind of eh. You do have a little hub area. It's really not that interesting. It seems way more intricate than it actually is. I felt kind of like let down by it. In terms of armor diversity, there's definitely heavy, light, and medium armor. A lot of it has that traditional like Chinese look to it, which of course makes sense. This is a Chinese theme. I didn't find there was a lot of really cool sets though. I'm not a big fan of like classic Chinese armor. There's some really ostentatious things. There's some robes. There's two demonic looking sets, which are kind of neat. They put like these evil, like corrupted wings on your back or make you look like a hollowed out soldier, which feels more like a Dark Souls boss because you do fight those near the end of the game, some like crazy looking guys. But there was really only one set that I can think of that was like that. I made my my glamour set into basically just looking kind of like a barbarian. Like you can see, like it's basically the first boss's set because I was using a hammer the whole time. And also, you know, it makes my character look kind of cool in my opinion. I like that look of someone who's just like in tattered clothing with just like some basic armor, a big ass hammer. They're barefoot running around just smacking all these demons around. I think that's kind of cool. But again, there wasn't a lot of options for that. It was kind of, you know, a limited amount there, which I think is a little lacking. Like in Neo, I felt like they gave you some more interesting looking sets that had some, you know, fun ideas going into them, or they had some more, you know, demonic based ones. You know, again, neither of them really has the best options, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit more. I am using that demonic hammer though, which I got later in the game, but really it doesn't matter that much. You can change the stats on your gear pretty easily, and it's just not that exciting. You don't find anything that's super unique. Even set bonuses, which this game does have, are pretty wimpy. They're just so lame. It's like, oh, 3.2% more damage while doing this, or 3.2% more water damage, or, you know, like extra defense if you have 8 pieces of this thing equipped. And it just never felt meaningful the way Neo sets do, where you really felt like you were building something that let you do something unique or fun. So yeah, I was a little let down by that. Environments kind of range, so some levels are, you know, they look different, but the colors get kind of muted. There's a lot of brown, there's a lot of dark, again, very Neo-like. I even feel like some of them are reused levels from Neo with some minor changes, or they just feel too similar to those Neo levels. Like, oh, here's a level full of crystal formations, here's a level that's in the water where you fall in, and it's really annoying. I can't say that I was super fascinated by that. Movement was pretty cool though. Being able to double jump or slightly double jump was nice. Jumping off of walls is kind of cool. It does get that like Chinese movie feel going for it. So I do appreciate that to an extent. But yeah, I didn't like falling into water because it's really jarring when that happens. You just pop right back up with like lower health, and it can be very awkward, and you're just surprised you're even still alive. So it's kind of story, it just sucks. It's bad. The story in this is nothing good. There's nothing really to write home about. The characters don't really build up on you. The only character that sort of does is the girl with the white robe, whose name I completely forget, who I think is like Lu Bu's sister. And even there, it's really just not that interesting. Even Neo, like Neo 1 had a way better story. Neo 2 even had some more connected story, because at least it built up. You dealt with some of the same people. It felt like something was going on. In this, I feel like you're given so many characters that show up just to be like, look how cool I am. And I guess they're homage to, like, you know, the people in these sort of stories. In this, I forget the exact you know, Chinese fantasy story that it is. Is it like the Romance of the Kingdoms or something like that? And that's cool. Like, I know Guan Yu. Like, I think a lot of people know Guan Yu and Lu Bu, but I just didn't find it that exciting to just have them sort of cameo in and then dive away. Like, I get these characters are cool, but they're not really making them cool here. They just kind of show up and they're like, yeah, I'm a really cool character. All right, see ya, peace. And yeah, it's kind of meh. You know, I just didn't like it that much. The end of it, the last boss wasn't that exciting. I do think there were some really cool fights, like the Lu Bu fight when he's a human is super good and super hard. The Lu Bu fight when he's a demon is also pretty decent. I found him actually easier in that difficulty. Maybe I just got a little better at that point, but yeah, I think the game's a 7. I think it's good. It's just not great. It still feels like a downgrade to Neo, despite the graphical enhancements. I do like the character creator, but it's pretty much the same as Neo. They don't really feel like they enhanced it, and I think it's really evident that this is made by like a Team B, and that's the rumors I've heard, that the A team that makes like the main Neo entries is doing another Japanese themed game that's coming out, and this is kind of like the B team just kind of reusing some assets and like making something, which is good. My problem with this game, I think, is just how limited you are in the way you play it. And I think you lose a lot of the technical difficulty, so I'm going to get into that a little bit here. I really like Neo because it gives you so many options in terms of combat. Every weapon has, like, a very distinct style to it, and you get lots of combinations and things you can do in the middle of combos. You can switch stances between a high stance, a middle stance, and a low stance, and those have their different attack patterns, different heavy attacks. And immediately that might sound like too much when you're first starting out, and it kind of can be, especially since each stance has like a strength, like it's better at letting you dodge, or it's better at breaking enemies. And that can be very frustrating when you're new to the game, and many people get turned off by it. But when you get used to that, it feels so good because you feel like you've mastered the game, and it really is supposed to be a combat mastery. It's so different when you do that. And in this, I never had that aha moment. It was just kind of like, oh, I need to stop trying to attack so much. I have to just wait and parry. Or I need to be, you know, thoughtful about this one attack, and that's all I got to worry about. Or I just bait out a heavy strike. Or I cheese this boss by doing jump attacks. Like, it never felt like I really mastered my weapon as much as it was just like learn the parry timer, just keep parrying. Doing other stuff is just kind of like a waste of your time. It's a little frustrating like that. Overall, though, it's okay. Like, I think there's a reason, though, that people aren't talking about it as much. I think there's a reason why it's not super popular. It's that you have to play a very specific way. I saw a pretty, you know, I saw a streamer, Asmongold, who I'm sure a lot of you know. I like watching his gameplay. He's generally pretty good at playing, despite people who criticize him a lot. I think he's a pretty good player. But I think the reason he had so much trouble with this game was he was trying to play it as if you had options, and you don't have options here. You have to parry, you have to bait out strikes, or you have to just instantly overwhelm the enemy. And you're just not going to be able to do that on most bosses, especially when you're not like geared, like over geared for them. So, you know, when you're fighting them on level, it's just kind of wait around, parry, do the big strike, do your big hit, hope you don't miss. And it just doesn't feel like it flows together as well as it should. The game is okay, but yeah, I just don't think it's as good as Neo. So to answer the question, who's this for? This is for someone who's got the Neo itch, like I always do, and just wants something to play. But honestly, I don't think it's really that worth it. I don't think the story is worth all the execution. I don't think it ends up paying off. Maybe some DLC will change that, But for me, it just didn't land as hard. If you've yet to play Neo 1 or Neo 2, I think those games are better than this one. And I think they're a little more fun, they're a little more varied. If you really love parrying, though, this might be, you know, this is your game. If you really like Sekiro, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly because it's been a while, sorry. But if you really like that, there is something here for you. I just feel like you'd be better off playing that. So if you haven't played Sekiro, you should go play that. For Sekiro, again, I'm sorry for anyone who I offend by mispronouncing that. I didn't really play that game a ton because I wasn't super about the parry gameplay. I played it a little bit. I'm probably going to go back to it at some point. But if that's really what you enjoy, that's a good game. Way better at pulling that off than this one is. And if you're after, you know, Neo gameplay, just play Neo. Play Neo 1 or Neo 2. And if you're a Souls fan, just wait for the next Elden Ring DLC. I find this game is okay, but it just feels a little clunky at sometimes. It doesn't feel like they really thought everything through as well. Not everything's as balanced as it could be. Now, I'm going to zoom ahead a little bit here just to show you some monster gameplay, because they do fight a little different than humans. The trick is really just, again, to look out for big strikes, just parry those, back up when you need to, and then just take advantage. Enemies love to jump around a lot, as you can see. Sometimes you kind of got to spam. There's one here, this big dude over here. They're not too bad to deal with. Like, look, you can pull one out. I shot this thing, I pulled it out. When they do the big strike, wait for it to flash red. That's when you want to parry. So you see, I'm going to scroll back a little bit. This is the trick. Let me pause this. Let me take it nice and slow here. All right, so first I draw it out, blah, blah, blah. Now, it's going to go red for a second first, so watch. So that's the basic strike, right? It's starting to do the red hit. But there's a little flash that was on its head just for like a second there. Like a fraction of a second. That's when you usually want to parry. A lot of enemies have that when they're doing their big red, you know, unblockable attack. Is there's a flash, a very slight flash. And when that slight flash happens, that's when you generally want to parry. So if you're having trouble parrying, look for that flash. It might help you out a lot. Also, some enemies blow up, which fucking sucks when you're locked into a strike like I was there. So you just kind of make do. You have a lot of healing potions, and you get lots of refills for a reason. It annoys me too, but it happens. And then when it comes to fighting big enemies in the area, like here, I can show you some pretty decent gameplay, I think. Sometimes I do buff up a little bit. You see how they just dodge around a lot. But if you just always parry their big strikes, you're kind of careful about where you're landing, you wait it out, you won't get hit too much. And again, if you get hit while doing a heavy attack, it's not so bad. Once you break an enemy, it's pretty much over, and they're gone. Look how easy that was. And I'm avenging people because there's a lot of people who die because they don't know how to do that. Also, if you see an enemy that's kind of hard for you, it's best to try to do a jumping attack when possible. You even like off a little jump, like you can still get a heavy hit. Sometimes it fails, like there, it didn't work, but it's not really much of a problem. If you know the enemy's like combinations, it's pretty easy. Like, look, parry, 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 wait, parry, big heavy hit, break them, you're done. Easy. So it's not too hard to play this game. There are some enemies that frustrated me definitely the first few times, but yeah, it wasn't really that big a deal. The biggest thing I think that's kind of annoying too that you might find you struggle with is with bosses or any enemy. If you have an ally, which they sometimes force on you, sometimes it's better just to get rid of that ally. You can dismiss them because they draw enemy attacks, and that's parries you're not getting, and it makes it very hard to tell where attacks are coming from, and it just gets kind of awkward. So that can get kind of frustrating. I don't see what my last video was that I recorded here. Oh, I just did another side mission really quickly. But I just sort of flew through messing around with some weapons, which I found were not as effective. Yeah, some weapons, they have a really slow startup, or they lock you in for too long, and that can just be very annoying, because enemies can just kind of burst through you and make it really annoying. So I recommend finding a weapon you like, sticking with that, and just powering that up and not really worrying too much about other things. And here I think I actually died because I was screwing around with that. And then I just go back to my normal weapons after a bit, because I was just showing off like the spear and stuff, and how they're not really my favorites for certain reasons, but you know. most situations it's not too bad. And again, getting that jump attack, always helpful. Makes it easier. The game is okay. I just think that at a certain point, you're just blitzing through the levels, and you kind of lose some of that fun. Overall, though, good game. I'm going to end my review here, because otherwise I'm just going to waffle on about nothing. So yeah, again, good game, could be fun, but, you know, if you haven't played Neo 1, Neo 2, Sekiro, I'd play those things first. If you're really still itching for this kind of gameplay, then yeah, jump into it. But I feel like it's just kind of like a worse combination of all these. It could be refined. Don't get me wrong. DLC could improve this a lot. If they did a Wulong 2, I'm still going to play it. I think that if they improve on some of these systems, they kind of iron it out, they polish it up a little bit, they borrow a little bit less from Neo, they kind of make this work a little better. I could see something good coming out of it. But personally, I feel like it's kind of a downgrade to that. But that's about it. Talk to you guys later.